Sheeler, and I'm the founder of Two Bears Farm. We are a smokable hemp company in Durango, Colorado. I'm going into my 4th year of cultivation. The session that you're at today is Cannagriculture, navigating a new ag-based industry. Very exciting. As state legislative barriers to hemp cultivation continue to fall in succession, hemp farming has officially, rapidly, and monumentally become a part of the agriculture industry. This is a huge opportunity for a wide variety of industry players, as long as you are able to stay within the USDA's good graces. In this panel, we examine the current issues arising from these historical yet evolving industry-wide changes in law and how best to stay ahead of the curve, compliant and legal. So, as the moderator, I have carefully kept an eye on the USDA regs coming down recently with varying degrees of horrification, and, well, I have a little bit of time to plan. So we have 4 panelists here today who are more than happy to give you their take on what's going on and how they might solve. So I'll let them introduce themselves and speak for a few minutes, and then I'd just like to open it up to questions so that you can get the information that you came here for. So again, my name is Sarah Sheeler. I am Two Bears Farm. We're in Durango, Colorado. We specialize in cultivating top-shelf, organically grown, smokable hemp. That's all we do. We don't extract. We don't do anything else. And I will hand over to James, who will tell us a little bit about who he is.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for a second day. So my name is James Schwartz. I'm a cannabis cultivator in Oregon. I started growing medical cannabis 20 years ago, legally in the state. Oh, look at that. That helps, huh? I'm also a nurse by trade, so I've come at cannabis and cannabinoid therapeutics always from the healthcare standpoint. Clearly that this is an ag-based business, but yet we're using the product in a very unique way that's different from most agricultural products other than tobacco, which we already know they are happy to put all kinds of crazy chemicals in. I think that there's a lot that the hemp industry can learn from what's gone on in cannabis, and so I think as we start to apply better business practices as a whole, and more consistent, safe farming practices together as a whole, that will be better off. I think that we have on the side of cannabis some slightly over-regulated products, and we have the side on CBD that's been a bit too under-regulated, or not having any traceability, and product safety sort of stuff. But at the same time, I think that we're moving ahead, and what I always tell people is this has been a long evolution. This change does not come quick. We're building a brand new industry. It's not unlike other industries, and we can bring good business practices from those, but that we need to ensure that as we grow as a farm agricultural product. Even with cannabis, it is not sustainable to grow plants inside. It's just not. And so we have to remember that this is ultimately an agricultural product, and that's where I really think the hemp market can help cannabis. So with that.
Hi, my name is Tara Tedrow. This was going to be a fun panel, but then they invited a lawyer, which is what I do. So I chair my firm's Cannabis and Controlled Substances Practice Group in the state of Florida. I'm the only person in the state to be appointed to both of the state's hemp advisory boards, and then I'm a professor at the University of Florida. I teach the only marijuana law policy class there. So I think that there's a lot of folks who have not really read the USDA regulations with a view on how that's going to fundamentally impact the ability for people to cultivate hemp in a compliant manner. And I think the entire supply chain needs to take a very serious look at the type of agreements that you get into when it comes to buying seeds that you think are certified, when it comes to distributing nationwide product that you cultivate or that you are buying from cultivators. And if you are the one who is retailing it, there is a patchwork of regulations in the United States coming from under the USDA rules. And people don't realize that all of the states have the ability to enact stricter regulations than what the USDA has, which means you might have a different set of regulations in every single state. So from a retailer and distribution nationwide standpoint, that's pretty frightening, because there's not going to be a lot of consistency. And by the way, we're in interim final rule status under the USDA, which means that those rules are in effect from 10/31 till 11/1/2021. So We are not sure what that's going to look like, if the rules are going to continue to evolve from the USDA standpoint. If you haven't read the rules and commented, I can tell you a couple ones. THC limitations are something everybody should complain about to the USDA. 0.3% by dry weight is something everybody needs to make a public comment on. I think as of a couple weeks ago, there were maybe like 600 people in the US who had sent a formal comment. You can do it online, people. Anyone who's got a Facebook account, it takes probably less time to do that than post on your social media. So give feedback to the USDA because hopefully they will listen to it, and then we can get some good changes to regulations over time. But if anybody has questions on the regulatory impact, of course, happy to answer those. I don't want to be a dream killer because I think this is a great industry. I just hate to see that people fail when they could have prevented that on the front end.
Yeah, I totally want to second what you just said. That's fantastic. It's a USA.gov.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry.
Who you are.
Hi, I'm Emily Gogol. I'm the CEO at Infinite Tree. We're a cannabis nursery. So we serve hemp clients nationally, and then we serve the recreational marijuana market locally in Oregon. So I specialize in nursery plants for farmers. So just to second that, what you said about going to USA.gov or usagov.org or whatever to file a petition, it's easily searchable. It takes 2 seconds. When I filed my comment, actually I just looked to see who the person who filed right before me was. They have like a little running thing, and it was actually a professor who posted a very passionate paragraph and included a spreadsheet as an attachment, making the plea that the data was not there for the 0.3% THC, and that I just loved it. It was just random that I saw that when I did my comment, that his argument was that there was not material available in that was available in the U.S. or anywhere that could go above 10% CBD and be compliant with the 0.3% THC. So we're just going to economically kind of crash the industry if we have to fight with this, because everyone's going to have to pull their material early. So it's not to say that there aren't cultivars that exist that are going to be above that. I'm saying, like, I just like seeing this sort of passionate and data-driven approach that was in this one person's comment from a university. So please make your comment there. So my perspective is as a nursery person, so trying to provide compliant material and give as much background information to our growers as to how they can succeed with their crops. So we're really focused on doing R&D nationally to serve our clients and to provide that data to them so they can make the best informed decisions about what plants they want to grow into fantastic products. So that's kind of my perspective, and I run a team of folks who are scientists and engineers and agronomists to make sure that all happens. So that's the kind of approach we take to providing plants to people. So I can speak mostly to that for you guys today, so happy to answer any questions.
I'm Brian Jones. I'm a plant scientist and herbalist from the University of Minnesota. I am currently doing research with the cannabis plant, drug type and agricultural type. So I actually have more than 3 research projects going on, and so I'm saying that to say one person doing 3 research projects, if anybody's ever been in academia, that's really not where you want to be at. So we need more people who are excited about this crowd to tackle critical questions from an academic point of view. And so I'm looking for more support doing that, and for more. You would think that with cannabis being legal, you would have more students who would just beating down the door looking to do real research, but the users far outweigh the people who, make this plant available to us in a constructive manner. So I'm working on that. I'm working on cultivars to perform well in our specific zones and our areas. I would like more people to approach this plant from a horticultural and agricultural perspective rather than just, a gold rush. Because we have a lot of people who like to sell shovels and gold rushes, and let these people into our society. You get this lack of integrity, and in the cannabis industry, traditional market rather than calling it the black market, we have integrity, and I'm seeing a lapse in that now because of a lot of the money that's coming in from wrong places. So, let's just keep the heart of what we're trying to do here.
Right, thank you very much. By a show of hands, who here is already in cannabis?
Or hemp.
Or hemp?
Yeah, obviously, but not all the audience is with us.
How How many of you are looking to get into cannabis or hemp? So, how many of you have 5 years or more experience? Okay, so we have a little bit of a mixed group here. Unless any of you object, I'd like to open it up if anybody has any questions, so we can give you the information you need.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. One, this is a really impressive panel, by the way. A lot of complementary skill sets, and I don't mean to say that about myself, but I've sat on a lot of panels, and like the knowledge base that you have here actually is really amazing. So we're happy to just kind of talk. I'm sure all of us, I know the lawyer can talk, I know the plant guy who keeps out will talk. So like we're all stoked and fiery about what we do. So I'm sure that Sarah can ask us questions, or we can just talk, or you guys can ask us questions. But
No
a
matter
lot of
how
welcome
simple,
information
whatever
here.
you think, just,
Yeah.
bring it in.
So I guess I'll start throwing out some ideas and we can just go from there, unless you want to do that, Sarah. So as I mentioned, I think that we have to be smart about regulations. So that leads into exactly what she said, and the 0.3 THC, that kind of came from this nebulous number when we still just associated hemp with the textile industry. We didn't really envision ourselves using the oil at that point. And so this government just created this nomenclature to get to the point. Cannabis sativa L represents both hemp and medical or intoxicating cannabis. And that nomenclature basically was just created so that they could separate out intoxicating THC from non-intoxicating CBD. I say non-intoxicating because that's really what we're talking about. What's not characterized as non-psychoactive. CBD is quite psychoactive. That's why it reduces your stress, gets rid of your pain. Those are psychoactive effects. I lost my point.
Yeah, I think something on the regulatory side that, if you look again, another complaint you can make to the USDA, if you so choose, is the complaint about the fact that they're going to require that laboratories that do testing be DEA certified.
Thank you.
Yeah, and not just that, but that if you are going to do testing, testing has to be done 15 days prior to your harvest, and your state is going to have either a DEA agent, another federal agent, one of your state agents, or an agent certified by your state to go take the samples on your farm with you. So they're not going to trust you anymore to take your own samples and send them into a DEA certified lab, which, by the way, in the state of Florida, we have one DEA certified lab. So they're going to make a killing. I just don't know if they're going to be able to turn around samples in time for people to not have then hot crop afterward. And so hugely problematic when we think about the impact of those regulations. And the reason they want it to be a DEA certified lab is because if you're above 0.3%, now you have a federally illegal plant on your hands. One thing to keep in consideration about the 0.3% threshold, the USDA regulations specify that there's a measure of uncertainty built into the calculation. So they say that we have quantifiable measures of uncertainty that laboratories can take. So if you have a crop that tests at 0.35%, and the lab says our measure of uncertainty is 0.06%, your crop is not hot, because you are within that measure of uncertainty. It's like when you look at polling data, the plus or minus, right? And so if it was a 0.02% measure of uncertainty, your 0.35% crop is now hot. So the measure of uncertainty is good. That's not going to get us close enough to where we need to be, but I think that that's something for people to understand, and then understand what it means if your crop does test hot. So a lot of states, like Florida's framework, is just destruction, right? The USDA contemplates that you have what is a nice term, it's remediation, or basically just you destroy it. So that's economic loss to you if your crop is going to be hot. So if you can't remediate that plant and you just have to have a waste destruction or disposal plan, that's also very costly. And by the way, you have to have a DEA certified agent there with you disposing of the plant, so that you don't just, like smoke it as quickly as you can or sell it off on the black market or something. So, get over here.
And to do that on the supply chain side, like just thinking about if you are a farmer and you do get to that point, like there are many questions to unpack there in terms of how you even arrive there, right? Like how many people have done longitudinal testing of any varieties they're growing on their farm to know exactly how it matures? And it's going to be different every season, but what farmers of what scale even have that data to know, well, if I test every 4 days and then I know by this date of maturity I should hit this level of CBD, who actually has that data? We're going to have a huge testing bottleneck as people start to figure this out, where, oh my gosh, I'm going to actually have to contract with a testing lab to test my hemp every what's my threshold every 48 hours, every 5 days, like where's their comfort level, and then do their official testing. That's just one of the huge roadblocks, like practical roadblocks in this issue with the new regulations. And then, which I don't know how they're gonna solve.
Let me just ask you,
Yeah.
what do you think the recommended time should be? Because as the farmer, like, I think it's clear that we know that there are bad actors who are happy to dump all kinds of crazy shit on their plants that, like, I will explain to you why it's so bad for you. Clearly, we need some sort of testing when you're talking about a product that's potentially being used in drugs to fight cancer and immunosuppress patients.
Well, I'm talking about just CBD percent and THC
Right.
percent, but on the pesticide and endotoxin, mycotoxin thing is
So, like,
another great question.
we really understand the importance, so I'm asking you, what do you think a good guideline for should be how much we test?
So I don't think, in terms of regulation, I don't agree with the testing framework they propose. I think the 15-day harvest window is not practical for how people harvest of all size farms, whether you're a 5-acre farm or a 5,000-acre farm. I think there's a lot of product that's going to go to waste if there's only a 15-day window, first of all, and we're all battling weather as farmers, so I think that's also unreasonable, the 15-day window, from a practical standpoint. So regulation side, from a testing standpoint for farms, I would say that depending on the cultivar you grow, you should probably test every 3 days. I would say, once you get into the final, like, last 2 weeks of what you think your plant cycle is, because you can have, at least from the reports I'm seeing from people who have done some testing, and we have our own longitudinal testing that we haven't released yet, but it looks like it's going to be, some varieties can mature very quickly over a 7-day period. So if you have one data point on a Monday,
So you're specifically now really talking about because of the development of THC and when those...
yes, exactly, because
chemicals
you could test a plant on one Monday and go to harvest the following Monday, and you will have crossed that threshold. And that's what I'm really concerned about, because it's a pretty rapid maturation cycle for different cultivars, and unless you know, and also with the season too, like your environmental conditions. So I really recommend people, because of this new regulation, to plan on very rapid testing cycles, and that means you have to have labs that get data back to you that's reliable within that window as well. If it takes, in Oregon, at least for the labs that clients have talked to me about and that we use ourselves, 7 to 10 days to get data back is not going to be quickly enough. So it's a really, yeah, I guess I'm saying, it depends on what part of the season. If you were testing towards harvest, like the first, like when the bulk of harvest happened, like the first week or two, like the first week, last week of September this year in Oregon, people were reporting to me that it was like 7 to 10 days to get their material back. So,
We have a question?
I have two. So one on,
Guys, hold on 1 second. We need the mic for questions, otherwise we don't get it on recording.
So with the idea of people harvesting early so that their plants aren't going hot, what about the idea of, so they say they harvest and it might be hot, or letting it over mature and waiting for that THC to convert to CBN? Could that happen live on the plant, or is that something that, I mean, if you're letting it sit and cure and then you test it 6 months later and maybe it's not hot anymore? Has that
I don't have
kicked
data
around
on
ideas like
I
that?
don't have data on that. The issue with the current regulations is that your product will still be, like, in order to harvest, still have to be
CBD
tested.
levels might
So,
change.
and that brings the point, I don't know if anyone else would prefer to speak to remediation, but I'm very interested in, there are definitely extraction technologies that can do remediation. They can, I mean, we know about, I mean, beyond just crashing out CBD with solvents, but there are other ways to partition out the CBD from a scientific, like a relevant scientific process, and they're not even entertaining that. I mean, this is not new chemistry, this is not new technology, so they are not allowing for us to have that route. Like, well, if our material does test hot, that means there are maybe some certified processors that work with the DEA that have equipment that's been tested, and then you can route it to that facility. And sure, it's going to be expensive because it's going to be a restricted market, there's going to be a bottleneck there, but you at least have an option, as opposed to like criminalizing farmers who waited, who because of weather or whatnot had 3 extra days of growth and then went above that arbitrary number. So the fact they're at like every point of like the supply chain and like the process of this, like from seed to final product, there's like these amazing like infrastructure problems with how the regulations, it's very challenging.
I'm gonna let Bryant jump in real quick, but I did just want to say real briefly, with regards directly to your CBN breakdown question, because I actually have looked at this both in my raw flower as well as in my dried cannabis products. You do see some minor degradation of THC to CBN in a harvest period. You really see it in the drying cycle, so you can modify some of your dry techniques if you want to try and express more CBN and convert some of that THC. And where I've seen it most actually is when I'm doing my vintage cannabis, so I'm putting something away from 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, and then I'll bring it back out, and so clearly we've elevated CBN, and as certainly in that time frame. But sorry, go ahead, Brian.
One thing I want to comment on is a lot of this stuff is done after the fact, and doing research on this to actually be able to remediate these things while the plant is still in the soil is possible. Like, this plant is producing these secondary metabolites because it has precursors to do so. So if we can attack this stuff from a horticultural point of view, we can save so much money just on teaching better horticultural practices. If you understand what contributes to an end game, say an end state of a plant, i.e. being too much THC, well, if you understand that the CBDAS allele, it either needs to be functioning or non-functioning, and also has an ambiguous enzyme which makes THC or CBD, if you understand these types of things, you can attack these precursors before they become an issue. And this is a lot of things that we
Probably do that with like essential oil sprays, couldn't you? Like trying to attract certain terpene responses.
Yeah, there's certain stressors that you can put your plant through to where, you know, secondary metabolites is something, because secondary metabolites are still secondary. They're not essential to plant growth. So, I mean, if you just look at that in itself, if you create a condition in which a plant has no reason to create secondary metabolites, well, then you get a mute cannabis plant, just structurally, anatomically, morphologically as cannabis, but when you get into the oils or the olfactory part of it, there's nothing. It's possible to create a plant that just has no reason to make secondary metabolites. A lot of this stuff can be dealt with if people would just do simple soil tests and get somebody who has just a grasp on the next month of weather. Your soil type has so much to do with the precursor that this plant has to work with. If you're in an Andic soil with a high silica content and you're looking to grow a low THC cannabis, don't. Just take that further south, or in the corn belt where it's a lot of sandy alluvial outwash from glaciers. If you understand how soils are built in this country, it would give you a better roadmap as to what cultivar should even be placed in certain areas. Like, you'd be surprised as to how many, people who are going for low THC, and you're in a THC driving area. You're gonna, it's a lot of money that's gonna be involved with remediating this. I'm not saying it's not possible. If you were in one of these areas, then I would remediate my soil, make it a stressful soil, and then plant this plant. It's not hard to truck in a bunch of sand on top of clay. If you do that once, you don't have to worry about so much extra testing, because you know that the complete aptitude of your plants, you have a ceiling that you built into your area.
So I'm going to hop in here really quick as the moderator. For me, this comes down to one word, and that's people. For any of you who are familiar with this industry, or any other for that matter, your success or your utter failure depends on the people who you surround yourself with and upon whom you depend. So I'm hearing genetics, I'm hearing soil, I'm hearing remediation, I'm hearing legal, I'm hearing experience. And if you can't take the time to surround yourself with the kind of resources that you either buy by bringing in somebody else, or build because you inherently have that information already, or the ability to obtain it, I think it would be difficult for anybody to thrive in particularly in cannabis right now, and hemp, because there is so much uncertainty. So if you are thinking of going into hemp, you need to surround yourself with people who look a lot like these panelists, so that you get the information you need. A lot of people like to talk about, oh, the farmer, we're taking care of the farmer. Farmer's going to take care of himself. because that's upon which this entire industry is built. Without the farmer, it doesn't work at all.
And just on the tail of that, that was drop your mic kind of science.
Yeah.
And has a direct application to your business practice, right? Know your soil. Cultivate that soil in a manner that's healthy, and you will figure out how to produce those plants that you want. Pay attention to the science.
And just to put up maybe one fear aside, because I'll definitely give you a lot more things to be afraid of after this, but one fear we can put aside is that if your crop tests hot, even above that measure of uncertainty that gets built in by your laboratory that you're using, there's a 3 strikes rule under the way the USDA wrote its regulations. So testing hot should not mean that a bunch of cops show up and arrest you, right, because now you're growing marijuana. You have 3 strikes, so if you are found to be in violation, a negligent violation 3 times in 5 years, then you're banned from cultivating for 5 years. A negligent violation basically means that you were doing something that a reasonably cautious or prudent person in a similar situation as yours would have done. So if you aren't acting like a reasonably cautious and prudent person, then you are now negligent. So there is a legal threshold for what that means. And the USDA actually says even if you're testing at 0.5%, if you thought that your crop would not test hot because of the genetics that you were sold or other type of reliable information that you were provided, or if you were taking the steps of testing along the way, then they're not going to have criminal penalties for that. And that's very specific. So I don't want everybody thinking that the doors are going to get knocked down. Now, will the FDA be knocking down your door necessarily if you're selling end byproduct and putting it into food? By the way, yes. So go read all of the warning letters that the FDA is sending out. I mean, they are working overtime. Christmas doesn't matter. They're coming after companies, and they're getting hit with massive class action lawsuits all across the United States because there are plaintiffs' lawyers out there who see the money that is being made in cannabis and in hemp, and they are going to sue everybody in the supply chain. So even if you think, well, I was just the person, who sold it to the guy who white labeled it and sold it to the end retailer, everybody gets named in that lawsuit. So you really got to be careful. Read all of your supply chain agreements for your waivers, your indemnification provisions, to make sure what is going to happen if somebody gets sued. There's a lawsuit that just got filed in Colorado today. The woman is suing this company because the FDA has said that you cannot put CBD in food products, and that company was selling it in food products. A class action lawsuit. And then there's a dozen class action lawsuits for false advertising, mislabeling your products, and saying you have more CBD than you actually have. These are the things that will shut companies down. And so these are the things that people have to be really careful of, because I'm not a plaintiff's lawyer, but trust me when I say they are hungry for these cases, and they'll take them to shut down companies nationwide. And so you got to be really, really careful, because USDA regs don't talk about the FDA. Why? Because it is separate jurisdictional powers that the FDA has over end products in this industry. They also, USDA is also talk about certified seed. There's nothing about certification of seeds. A patchwork program nationwide about that. We already see class action lawsuits of people suing seed companies because the seeds were not what they promised them to be. And so I'm going to sue you for that, and I'm going to sue you for all the lost profit I would have gotten if I had actually been able to grow the way that you promised I could grow. So these are the things that should probably keep you up at night, keep you up for my clients, just things to think about.
But you did provide a really great and relatively easy solution to that, and you're totally correct. But for folks is like, document what you're doing. Like, if you're taking reasonable measures, have a folder, at your farm or on your computer, however you prefer to work. Make sure your staff have we purchased these things, we did these tests, we sent off. Here's where all of our testing results are. We tested on this Monday, and then we tested on the next Monday, and this was our harvest plan. Oh, but then, we had a crazy heat wave that happened, or we had a crazy frost that happened, so we had to move harvest. Just document this, and you'd be surprised when talking with regulatory agencies, especially working with cannabis farmers. I guess maybe coming from the science industry, but they're really happy when they can show up to your business or your farm and you have a packet ready to go for them and say, hey, this is what we have, whether it's for your organic certification or it's because you have a hot crop and they want to make sure you are responsible. It's good to keep those documents, and they don't have to be fancy. Just document, journal, keep records all in one place so you have a packet to show someone when they come by and say, hey, this is what we did and why. So it doesn't have to be complicated.
Get back to your question.
Yeah, sure. Okay, question number 2. Going back to standards and testing of pesticides. Is the FDA addressing any kind of standardization with pesticide testing? Because, people are growing monocrop now style at scale of smokable flower. And is there anything preventing them from putting Eagle 20 on that? Because when you heat up Eagle 20, it turns into cyanide.
I'll make one
It's also a
quick,
lawsuit.
I'll make one quick point. I think that you guys should go to the NCIA's FDA recommendations. It was 59 pages. I was a part of that drafting committee. There is some real specifics about what we think that they should do, but it's gonna be up to them. And we've seen bureaucracies make crazy shit in California and Oregon, you know.
But wouldn't you say like our testing standards in California are something to really potentially model? I mean, we're testing parts per million for unsafe pesticides and parts per billion for heavy metals.
But you also might be over-testing in some places.
And it's another patchwork of regulatory differences. Every state's going to come up with their own. The way that Florida's written ours, it'll probably be the most stringent regulatory framework in the country, which means it's going to be fundamentally more difficult for the cultivators, and it will make it much easier for people just to ship biomass into the state of Florida, which then we aren't regulating how much pesticide levels or anything else on there. So it'll be a strategic disadvantage from a market standpoint for our cultivators. And from a consumer safety standpoint, I think it's a disadvantage as well to not have an overarching regulatory framework for everybody in the industry to abide by.
Or at least have some
Some
standard
minimal,
federal
yeah,
standards
right.
that everybody knows at least what they're playing.
Like we shouldn't be, smoking cyanide.
Agreed.
That
Yeah.
probably
It
is
sounds
it.
simple. I'm not a doctor.
Injecting cyanide? Okay. Smoking, no.
Do we have any other questions?
I've heard from various people that smokable flower won't be around for much longer. What do you guys think about that?
At
If
least
I can, I'm a smokable flower farmer, so I'll weigh in. So right now, I have to think really, really hard about what I'm planting for next year. And most vendors don't have seeds available yet. Or they might, we haven't tested them. So we're thinking about something that's CBG dominant because I think it's easier to keep the THC low. But there are so many questions right now. I just get up in the morning and I do what I do. And I try to do a good job.
I think just from talking to clients nationally, and I think a lot of seed companies or plant companies, however, young plant companies, however you want to talk about, I just call it the nursery market. They're waiting to release their catalogs in Q1 of 2020 because people are having a lot of conversations with their teams and their partners about what they would like to set out for 2020 because of this whole rule issue. So it's just creating all these inefficiencies in the whole system because everyone's just waiting and hedging. But to speak to your point about smokables, I would say look at market trend data for consumption and look at the farm, the reality of what does it mean to quote grow for a smokable? I think it has a lot to do with your farming practices and your harvest method and then your drying method as well. And those are things that it is best, of course, to choose a cultivar or set of cultivars that's going to meet your smokables market spread, what you want to bring to market as a smokables product. But you do have options as the season. Maybe you get to hit July and you're like, you know what, actually, I want to start taking seconds. I have enough labor on hand, or the weather is looking like it's going to be a certain way where I can have some diverted to extraction as secondary buds, So I think you do have options, or maybe if mold sets in and your smokables crop isn't as viable anymore, you can, strategize around using it for a different product. So I think you do have options. You're not necessarily, people talk a lot about being locked into I'm growing just for smokables. That has a lot to do, of course, with the cultivars you plant, but also with all of you have to look at the entire, you have to look at each process down the line. And I have some farmers who are I didn't think about how I was going to dry 90% of my field for a smokable versus for extract. I'm well, that's a very different process. So I like to so I think there will be a smokables market, and I think that you also have options along the season to make decisions about how you route your product, whether you keep it all as smokables or do other options, but...
I mean, more legally, it wasn't going to be allowed.
Oh, yeah. It'll be
they'll allow, legally there'll be I don't know of any, is there anything?
Yeah, it's interesting, the state of Florida has no regulation on smokable whatsoever. We have it's a black hole in the wall.
So,
it doesn't even cover smokables.
Super high regulations on their farmers who grow it, but then on the people who protecting them with some sort of regulation, no.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I don't think that from a legal standpoint, that will necessarily go away. Again, the way that laws tend to get changed over time is either a bunch of complaints from industry professionals who say you guys wrote it wrong because you're legislators, you don't know anything about the industry of which you are writing legislation about, or a series of class action lawsuits tend to change the way that laws are written. So that will be probably happening much sooner for the vape industry than it will for the whole flower smokable industry. So, I mean, but again, unless people are putting Eagle 20 all over their crops, in which case smoking whole flower becomes very problematic as well. So the bad actors tend to change the laws over time, but I don't think that there's going to be something right now that's going to shut down the smokable market.
And you have the advantage too as a consumer, like, it's not, testing companies will accept testing requests from people without a license. I mean, you don't have to be a hemp nursery in Oregon to send flower out to get tested. So especially if you're buying flowers, it's relatively easy to get tested. If there's a company you really like and you want to double check what they're selling you, for $75 or $150, whatever, in that range, you can send it off. And you don't want to do it with every product you buy, right? But if you really like this company and you want to make sure what you're smoking over the next course of years or giving to friends and family is good stuff, like, you could make that investment. It's not impossible. Don't feel like you can't submit your own products that you're going to consume for testing. But yeah, it's not.
In general, the products market though will include some smokable flower. I think of both, low THC, CBD smokable flower and, THC flower. I think that's going to be one market segment. You're going to have a lot of products that are going to be pharmaceutical-esque. You're going to have some that are going to be food beverage-esque. But I think that smokable flower seems to always play a role in the products that we're going to see.
I'd like to say, comment a little bit. Cannabis grows fairly in every state in this country, right? And it boggles my mind that people continue to start from seed stock and they don't know the source. When it grows in your backyard, start with your feral seeds, develop those. They've already figured out how to conquer the terroir in which you're trying to grow these things. Just go out in nature and look for your ditch weed. Start there. Start with your feral cultivars. I try and tell us, horticulturally, there's a lot of ambiguity when it comes to, there's some mystique or there's some lore when it comes to this angiosperm. This is a class of plant that falls in a larger class of plants. So
Are you specifically talking about they should go look for plants outside or ones that are already prevalent in the general agricultural environment?
Feral cannabis. I'm looking, so there are cultivars out there who are
But from a business standpoint, that's not that you can do. I mean, as an OLCC licensed farmer in Oregon, I can only source my products from other licensed
Well,
companies.
even on the hemp side, I think the issue is scale. I mean, I
strain-wise,
see you're coming
you're right
from,
on.
it's just, if you're gonna plant 100 acres, it would be hard to.
Yeah, no, that's a long project. I'm
You're
saying,
saying, okay.
When you want to keep down on the side and get one with the planet, I love it.
Getting close to the end of time, I think we have time for one more question, if you have any?
I have a question. I'm a new farmer and I've heard a lot of the horror stories and pitfalls.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. So I want to know from the experts up here. I'm going to start planting fresh ground. Can you tell me what to avoid, the pitfalls, and just sort of,
Hire a consultant
yeah.
who actually knows what they're doing, so.
Find somebody who's been doing it for years and take advantage of what they're willing to share. Test your soil, test your soil, test your soil.
I'm sure all
You can get
of us up here would.
It's called a phase one.
consult
Yeah,
everyone who
it's
wants to
wrong.
know.
I mean,
What is it
it's
called?
This one? Oh, not really.
At the end of the day, I think a little bit what you spoke to is that this is an amazing plant with a lot of properties, and we're using it in ways that other plants are not, that some plants are not currently used at this scale. But it's still a plant, and normal agricultural row crop principles like soil testing and tissue testing and proper amending and knowing your site
What
are all,
science?
I know, are all, well, just how you, it is different than corn, it is different than tomatoes that are grown acreage, but it's still like corn and like soybeans and wheat, that it has similar parameters that have to be paid attention to. So I think you don't necessarily have to find someone. It's great to have expert cannabis knowledge is really important because it does have its own specialty crop parameters, but trusting good farming, agricultural foundation is, I think, what sets a lot of people apart, going with, it is a crop, and applying those principles to it will get you the most success. So whatever consultant you go with, or whatever other farmers you talk to, it is a specialty crop in a sense, but it still follows traditional ag practices just like everything.
And with traditional ag practices, get a solid SOP. Because if you're the head gardener and you're the guy who's in charge, you better know what you're doing with gardening. And you better be able to write it down for somebody else to follow your instructions, because I can tell you that every grower I meet is the best grower in the world. They all grow the world's best cannabis. And so you be sure when you find that person who's going to be your guiding principle in that agricultural part, that you either know that because you came from a farming background, or you find someone you can trust and that you know has really the experience they say. Don't trust somebody who's been like, oh yeah, I've been a grower for 20 years. Really? How big? Oh, I had a plant in my closet. No. You're talking about commercial agriculture now. This is not in your basement.
One of the things to consider, because hemp is able to remediate toxic soil over time. And how does it do that? Well, it's sucking toxins out of the soil. So think about that. So that's why you need to get a phase 1 ESA, right? Do an environmental analysis on the soil, get soil reports, so that you make sure that if you are using land that was previously cultivating other traditional crops, like in Florida, I see this all the time for citrus, and I'm like, wonderful. Incredibly heavy pesticide use over time. So we're going to pull arsenic and lead and all these other things out of your soil, and that's going to go into your crop. Number one, from a consumer standpoint, bad for business. Number two, you're going to fail under our state pesticide regulations.
So they said you got to plant first this plant that sucks up the metals, heavy metals out.
And water as well. People don't talk about water.
Test your water, test your soil, just to
Where's it
make sure
coming
it's
from?
clean.
They're
before
using
you plant.
hemp outside Fukushima to clean radiation out of the soil.
Fukushima plant?
Outside Fukushima in Japan.
Oh.
That's the level of bioremediation we're talking about.
You can remediate soil through other measures. It's a very expensive process if you have true toxic soil though. So that's something to consider before you buy land or invest in anybody who is farming. If you already have that land, you should do that due diligence on the front end prior to planting. And then also just make sure that you've done really good due diligence on the seeds or any of the cultivars that you're purchasing. And again, you really got to read those contracts, because they are probably going to say, we are selling you X, but it might be Y, and it could be Z, and you can't come after us for anything if it is. So be careful who you buy from and what type of agreements that you're
Is they
signing.
just on organic land?
Well,
I mean, like if it's certified organic soil?
Well, I guess it's a process to get
Correct,
it.
yes,
process.
correct.
It's a 3-year deal?
there's so it depends. So for example, like our farm just got its organic certification. It is currently a 3-year look back.
Okay.
And the issue is that you do have to supply those tests, so that if you are an organically certified, and also if you are looking to work with someone who's an organic farm, make sure you talk to them about when they were certified and how, and see the documentation, because I've seen some questionable things. But basically it's a 3-year look back, and that you have to show your testing that you don't have anything that could be a problem moving forward that's not aligned with the organic certification process with the USDA. So starting with a farm that's certified organic is a really good place. I think then also even organic farms, I would still test their material for whether or not they're using something that's maybe not disclosed, or their
Honest with what they use.
and also their neighbors or the soil they brought in might have something, they bought what they thought was organic soil and their vendor told them it was organic, and they
Their
say.
neighbor a mile away who's spraying shit from air.
Get a
I know,
pesticide.
and I'm just saying, so I think it's luckily, the USDA has allowed hemp to be treated like all other crops and get proper USDA organic certification programs in place, so that now we can at least say we're following the same rules as everybody else, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't still be diligent. So I think there is a path forward there, and it's not that onerous to do these tests. I think you just have to know, we just have to make sure we check every step, but it's, you don't have to necessarily hire a geological firm to do an environmental study on your property. If you can, that's great, but I'm saying you can work with your soil testing company to do the necessary randomized soil testing, so that when you get your report back and you interpret it with your soil company, they're able to help you. So I'm all for phase ones, but for people that can't do a phase 1, because it can be expensive depending on your acreage, you can work with your testing company to do the proper sampling, get the data back, and it's, whether it's plus or minus for lead, I mean, it's usually, you can usually interpret that if you're a farm. So.
Thank you. We are close to the end of our time. If you have delegates yet for the event, you can, I'm sure, contact any of these people if you have additional questions. My information is available as well. I want to thank you for taking the time to participate in a somewhat lively discussion, because it does matter as we look into 2020 and what happens with hemp going forward. So thank you very much.